Hey guys, it's Scott with Scotty B Cards, and in this video I want to talk all about Vladimir Guerrero Jr. Recently, I did a tier list to MLB Network's top 20 players, and on this tier list, I ranked them by investability for the medium to long term. And in this tier list, I put Vladimir Guerrero Jr. next to Nolan Arenado, Manny Machado, Freddie Freeman as a B+. Above him, you had Tatis as an A-, Soto and Acuna were both A's. And people were kind of questioning that opinion, and I actually agree with that. When I rewatched it after I recorded a few weeks ago, because I recorded it in advance and then I posted it, I thought, yeah, maybe he might be a little too low. But regardless, there is an argument for being in the B+ tier right now. And I did say in the video, if he can have another big year this year, I think he's easily in the A tier. So in this video, I want to talk about Vladimir Guerrero Jr. and really discuss what could make him a B+, an A, where he's going to be long term, and discuss how a first baseman like himself plays out in the hobby and discussing his collectability. So let's just start out with his awesome offensive numbers. Last year, he was a top 3 offensive player in baseball. He was MVP runner-up to Shohei Ohtani. Any other year, he may have actually won it. If Ohtani wasn't doing Ohtani things, he would have won it last year. You can see WAR for position players. He was 4th in all of MLB. In adjusted OPS+, OPS plus is a metric where 100 is league average. Anything above 100 is good. He was 3rd in all of baseball with a 169 OPS+. His adjusted batting runs, meaning he actually created 59 batting runs compared to the league leader in Juan Soto at 65. So top 3 there as well. Almost any metric you look at, advanced or if you look at traditional, 48 home runs, 111 RBI, 311 batting average, 401 on base, 601 slugging, over a 1,000 OPS, and led the American League with a 166 OPS+. And again, you can see Harper and Soto led him in the National League for all of baseball. But regardless, really impressive stats. If we go look at his ZiPS 3-year projection, you'll even see that he's projected to be worth 6 WAR over the next 3 years. So that's going to be 18 WAR, wins above replacement, meaning he's providing 18 additional wins the average player would not have provided at that position. Wins above replacement is a cumulative number, and if you're over 5, it means you're basically between an all-star and an MVP. So that's where Vlad is projected for the next 3 years. Offensively, one of the best, if not top 2 or 3 in all of Major League Baseball. Mike Trout wasn't healthy last year. His actual average is a 176 OPS+, so he'll be up there again this year if he can remain healthy. And I think they have relatively similar offensive profiles. Mike Trout is a really on-base guy, same with Juan Soto, but Trout and Vlad both can slug for a lot. Vlad may hit for a higher batting average than everybody else on this list, essentially, based off of his hit tool. But let's discuss his percentile rankings before we jump into some defense and base running statistics. For his percentile rankings, you'll see he's red everywhere. That means he's top, 99th percentile, the best 99th in all of baseball for average exit velocity and so forth. Even his strikeout rate is really low in comparison to the rest of the league. His chase rate's really good as well. He doesn't chase very often. He swings and misses a lot, but no big deal if he's not striking out a lot. It just means he's taking some daddy hacks when he has the opportunity. He's able to spray the ball across the entire field and get home runs to all parts of the park and to do all these sort of things that most players just can't really do. On top of that is outs above average. That's the only thing that really is bad, meaning defensively outs above average is Baseball Savant's metric to determine defensive value, and he's below average. He's in the 17th percentile, meaning 83% of the league is actually better than him defensively. Let's talk about those defensive issues a little bit more. Whatever type of metric you're looking at, whether you're looking at Baseball Reference, you'll see it's negative. If you look at Fangraphs, you'll see it's negative. If you look at Baseball Savant and outs above average, it's negative. You can see he was 168th in all of Major League Baseball defensively last year, right ahead of Maikel Franco. So not really ever going to provide any defensive utility, which is kind of a knock against him. I did post it and I said one of the main things for Vlad that's a detraction for me is that he's not a good defensive player. And people argue well, does that really matter in baseball? And I would say yes, because, WAR is an accumulative stat. WAR takes into consideration offense, base running, and defense. It takes all of those runs and creates that building stat over the year. And if you're bad on defense and base running, which Vlad, you can see right here is his base running runs. He was worth negative 2.1 and worth negative 11.1 defensive runs. That hurts that WAR number. If he would have been able to essentially been average at both of those two things, which is asking for quite a bit, it's a really big increase, that'd probably give him around 8.5 WAR. Probably could have won him the MVP if he was more well-rounded in general. So that's one thing where, yes, it does impact your values because he wasn't a great defender. It made it so his WAR numbers and other cumulative stats weren't as high, and that does impact values as awards may be missed. Other people may say, well, Juan Soto has 7.1 WAR and he's still improving offensively. It's just there's those arguments where Mike Trout or Mookie Betts, they have 10 WAR seasons because they're well-rounded 5-tool players. But we do pay for offense with sports card card collecting. So maybe it's overblown, but there is some point where some people may not be as heavily invested in Vlad because of that point. If we compare him to first baseman in the league, out of the 36 qualified first baseman defensively, he was 31st in like basically the bottom 6 defensive first baseman, which does again hurt his overall value and makes you a little concerned for the future because you usually get worse on defense as you age. This was his first year at first base, so it could be something he gets better at this year. On top of that, actually, according to a lot of these defensive metrics, he actually got worse moving from third to first. It may not be as noticeable, but maybe he's not ranging as well. Maybe he's not picking balls that other players would have, or being able to reach with the same range of their players. All these things that eye test may not show because he's getting to the average play and doing it fine, but he might not be making these normal plays that, an average first baseman, let's say someone who has, around -5 even, would be making. So it's kind of a tough thing to measure. Let's compare him to other young guys and see if it's really that bad and kind of discuss why these other players are well-rounded, which means they could have more potential and a higher ceiling. Vlad, this is the base running runs, was worth -2.1 base running runs. Tatis was 9.3 base running runs, which is one of the best in the league. Really, really good. That's why his WAR totals were so high. It's because he's able to do things on offense, defense, and on the base paths. Juan Soto was not a good base runner. He's actually worse than Vlad on the base paths. And then Ronald Acuna Jr., he was worth quite a bit in only half a season. So you can see where this 5-tool mentality comes from. If we look at the defensive numbers, he was worth -11.1 runs, while Tatis was worth only -5.3. We heard how bad Tatis was, but he was only half as bad defensively as Vlad. It's tough to compare because it's across position, so it's not quite as fair, and I understand that, but regardless, we'll be looking at this in a vacuum just to be consistent. Juan Soto was -4.3, and then Acuna was actually positive at 0.4. So that's where, again, base running and defense is tough. Even if you look at Juan Soto, his defense is not nearly as bad as Vlad's, even though it's not necessarily elite, and Acuna did pretty well, according to this one metric on defense. Outs above average rates Juan Soto, Tatis, and Acuna all as positive defenders. That's the outs above average is the one metric I trust the most. That's what ranked Vladdy as the 31st out of 36 qualified first baseman. This is another reason why people may be a little hesitant about Vladimir Guerrero Jr., and this is why I said I wanted to see him do it for one more year. So the first half of the year, because of COVID, he had to play in Dunedin and Buffalo. They couldn't go to Canada to actually play in Toronto, so they played in these parks. Dunedin and Buffalo were the two most hitter-friendly parks in all of baseball. So Vlad was really benefiting from being in those minor league parks that play much more offensively than even Coors Field. And so you can see 1.4 versus with Coors Field 1.26. That's a really big increase. And Vlad played half of his games in the first half at these parks. And this is a screenshot I took on June 29th for a video I posted on this channel, where he had a 1351 OPS and a 945 OPS. 1351 at home, 945 on the road. That's a very big difference. And because of that, I said when he goes back to the Rogers Center, you can see his pre-2021 home and away splits from 2019 and 2020. He was really bad at Rogers Center, a 677 OPS. So I thought maybe he won't be as good. And that's one thing I want to see is a full year at the Rogers Center and see him take that step forward. Or maybe he's not seeing off the batter's eye well out of the pitcher's hand. Maybe for some reason it's just tough for him to pick up the ball. And I just wanted to kind of see him take that next step at his home ballpark. We'll be playing a lot of his games in the future. You can see at the end of the year, once they went back to Toronto, July 30th, his OPS at home dropped from 1351 to 1133. His road OPS dropped from 945 to 875. Not nearly a significant drop as his home drop, but it is what it is. You can see Vlad, he ended up with a 332 batting average at home compared to a 392 in the first half. So it did drop quite a bit. That means it was probably around 300 or lower when he went back to the Rogers Center. Here is his monthly for 2021 splits. So you can see in July, he had a 286 batting average, 267, 306 versus 350, 302, 371. Take that for what it's worth. That's just partially why I wanted to see one more year out of him. I think he'll have a good year. We even saw in New York, he had 3 home runs and a double already. I think he'll be just fine, but these numbers were a little worrisome because the ballpark he was playing in was basically hitter's paradise type of a thing. Let's compare card prices now. He's undervalued. He's just plain and simple undervalued in comparison to his peers. He's only 23. We may think he's older because he has just a more hefty body naturally, a bigger frame. Because of that, collectors a little bit more worried about him long-term and his physique and his, staying in shape type of a thing. I'm not too worried about that at all myself at all. I think he's shown his willingness to stay in shape at this point. He wants to be good. He's driven, and I think that's really important. But these are all the BGS 9.5 Bowman Chrome autograph refractors. I tried to put Acuna on here, but it wouldn't work on market movers for some reason. But you can see Juan Soto is around $8,500. Tatis is around $5,000, and Vlad's around $3,000. So a very big price discrepancy between these three, and I think this will close a little bit if Vlad continues to be hot, but he has to continue to be hot. Soto and Vlad were their respective leagues MVP runner-ups last year, and you can see they started off relatively close, and Soto is now significantly higher than where Vlad is. So I don't know if that is because he's a first baseman. He doesn't have the all-around tool set that maybe Juan Soto provides because he's a better defender. I don't know why that is the case. First basemen generally are not as respected. There's not many first basemen that are all-time greats. You have Lou Gehrig, you have Albert Pujols, maybe Miguel Cabrera, all these different players. But it's hard to find first basemen who are able to be that elite. Frank Thomas is another one as well. Let's look at their flagship cards. This isn't really Vlad's flagship because that's in Topps Update, but this is his Series 2, market cap of $800,000, while Soto is a market cap of $3 million. Tatis is $1.7 million. Acuna is basically $2 million. The pop on this Vlad is significantly lower, and it's only worth, $205 versus $132 and $105 for Acuna. It should be a lot higher, in my opinion. I think this card will appreciate because it's a lower pop. Vlad's hot. People will pay for it. Let's look at historical comps. I mentioned Frank Thomas. I think that's the most similar player. He's a first baseman. Vlad may transfer to a DH eventually, and if that's the case, it'll be really on Frank Thomas's path. Frank Thomas was one of the best offensive players of all time for pure offense. He didn't do much in the field at all, and he was a DH for the majority of his career. 301 batting average, OPS plus of 156. For his career is 56% better than league average, but he's still underselling Ken Griffey Jr. by quite a bit. Ken Griffey Jr. has a pop of 1,355 for his top stiffening at PSA 9. Thomas has 434, but he's still worth less than Griffey. And that could be the positional thing versus, defense provided by Griffey was significantly better and so forth, while Frank Thomas was a much better offensive player. First basemen who have value, top tier value, usually with center fielders, shortstops, outfielders. It's easy to have a lot of players. With first baseman, you have Pujols and Gehrig, in my opinion. Medium value, you have Miguel Cabrera, Jimmy Fox, Willie McCovey, Frank Thomas. And then low value, there's a lot of low value first basemen of Hank Greenberg, Jeff Bagwell, Jim Thome, Todd Helton, and Eddie Murray. So that's another reason why it's hard long-term to have good value as a DH/first baseman. Edgar Martinez and David Ortiz are the only DH in the Hall of Fame, primary DH players, which can make it tough for someone with just a pure offensive profile without that defensive utility. There are a ton of pros about Vladdy. So I've shown the good, I've shown the bad. I want to say I think we should get away from looking at Soto, Acuna, Tatis, and Vlad in the same category all the time. People did the same thing with Trout and Harper, and they're both on a Hall of Fame path. Mike Trout's better, but we're not respecting Bryce Harper enough. And that might be happening here. We're going to have to see how it shakes out over the next few years because Vlad may have the best career. We can't say for sure. I personally believe in Soto because I like his offensive profile. He had a better OPS plus than Vlad last year. Vlad is a more power hitter than Soto is, but Soto's more of an on-base guy, which still provides offensive value. On top of that, Soto has less rookie cards than Vlad. Vlad was a mid-season, so he has a lot more rookies versus a late season addition to these checklists. But regardless, other pros, we care about offense. We pay for home runs, and Vlad has that. And I don't think we're quite to where his value should be after the year he had last year and the start he's had this year. He's historically healthy. If you look at Acuna and Tatis, Soto's been healthy as well, which is also why I like him. That's one thing I love about Vlad. He played 161 games last year. That doesn't happen nowadays. If he's able to maintain that by playing at first and not putting his body on the line, sliding into second, all these different plays, trying to get stolen bases, that's good for his cards and good for you as a collector. He's dynamic, he's fun, and he's nice. It's hard to find players that are dynamic, fun, and nice. Usually, you only have one or two of those things, other ones just not there. And Vlad has all three. He's extremely young still. He's only 23 years old. He has tons of time to develop. Most players, most prospects are older than Vlad. Vlad was introduced into the league at a very young age. He's undervalued, plain and simple. We already looked at it. He's undervalued compared to his comps. And he has massive upside. 60 home run upside is something you do not see often in a lot of baseball players, if hardly any. Maybe 15 to 20 all time. Another couple takeaways. My only concern is what is his ceiling? We know his floor is really high. He has a high floor. We know he's going to be a good ball player. But because he doesn't have the utility on defense and on the base paths, what is his ceiling? Can he be an 8 to 9 WAR player? We don't know because he has to really take the next step defensively to get there. Offensively, he can still get better. Let's say he's around 7.5 to 8 WAR eventually. He's still going to have a hard time reaching that 10 WAR stratosphere, which really makes your cards explode. Will he age well? A lot of first basemen do. A lot of first basemen don't. We'll have to see. I think he'll be fine, but injury bugs is something that we never want to see, but it's also impossible to predict. The weight doesn't worry me one bit. If you're worried about that as a collector, I'm just personally not worried about it. He's shown that he wants to be in shape and he's working hard at it. Not a big deal to me at all. Usually when we get to the season, you lose weight across the year because you're constantly playing sports. It's hard to put weight on for a lot of players. I'm not worried about that with Vlad. He's going to have a good career on a good team, which will help his card values, and that's something we do not look at. And like I said earlier, I just want to see how he does this year. If he can put up similar numbers playing in a less hitter-friendly home park, that's great. I've heard that argument about Arenado, Trevor Story, DJ LeMahieu, Larry Walker, Todd Helton my entire time as a Colorado Rockies fan. I don't think it's unfair to say the same thing about Vlad when his breakout year, the first half, when he was significantly better than the second half at home, was at really hitter-friendly parks. His poor defense and base running will always be a part of his makeup, and that's okay. He could be a good player and still not be a great defender. He's not a 5-tool player, and that's also okay. We need to realize that there's good players that aren't 5-tool players. Actually, Hall of Fame players that that aren't 5-tool players. Those 5-tool players may be like the Willie Mays and the Mickey Mantles, who have the highest WAR totals ever, but lots of awesome baseball players who'll be Hall of Famers don't have those 5 tools, and that's completely okay. So was I too hard on Vlad? Maybe. Actually, probably. I probably was too hard on Vlad. Everybody who watches my channel, I've even seen people comment on forums that I'm too hard on Vlad. And I am. I'm hard on Vlad because I want to see him take that next step. He has all the potential to be this amazing player. He just hasn't quite unlocked that defensive side yet. And if he can improve that, guys, he is going to be worth a lot in regards to Major League Baseball. So let's hope he can get there. If he doesn't, he'll still be a great ball player, be 5 to 7 WAR for his career. Let's just hope he can take that step to be worth 7.5 to 8 WAR in his career. Other than that, guys, thank you for watching. Let me know in the comments below if you have the same outlook on Vlad, if you're positive, negative, what you're thinking. I know in the past I've been relatively critical, but I do think he's a good ball player, and I think I'm actually looking to buy some of his cards right now because he is undervalued in comparison to his peers. So thanks for watching, guys, and I'll catch you in the next video.